this station doesn't receive any money from anyone except for you, the listener. There's many ways you can donate. Please do if you can. There's Patreon, you get money orders, cash, Bitcoin, whatever you like. Whatever you like. Just go to the homepage and find the donate button and such. And if you can't donate, that's okay. That's cool. Times have happened over. But tell people about the station. Maybe about this show. Maybe about some other shows. Doesn't really matter. But the more people you tell, the more likely it is that one of those will donate to the station. This ain't nothing free. Ain't nothing free. And you don't want me to sing, trust me, it's not something. I tell you what, we'll have a telephone where I won't sing. Okay, how's that? Donate so Mackie doesn't sing. Yes. Today is the 18th of January 2024. January 2024, that's right. Still no flying cars. Still no flying cars. Yeah. You can catch the cave on the air, on the line, on your smart device. You don't have to listen anywhere or listen at home on the graze. Tabletop Digital Radio. Archives are still free. Another good reason to donate. Donations are important. This is Listener-funded radio, everybody. So you can go into those archives and check out all the stuff that's there. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff. Before we start broadcasting at you in anger, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which we broadcast. And today that's the
Bangchalang.
Still the Bangchalang, and for me, of course, the Darug people. We like to pay our respects to others, past, present, and future. Got a couple of stories about indigenous people and such that I want to discuss with Dave. Some interesting stuff's been happening. How are you, my friend?
No, I'll tell you after the show. It's all right. What's going on?
I tell you what's going on, my friend. Many things. We're in the chat now, so go into the chat if you want. Just comment there. Hey, comment Lady Horse in 1957, and what else do we have here? Memes. We've got memes, and we have. That's all I can see.
Narara is there.
No, yeah, well, that goes without saying. Well, of course, the Narara is there. Flippy is there. Maced 139. Let me quiet for a little while. That's okay. That's all right. I dig it. Yeah, look, there's a couple of things. The conflict, of course, is now escalated. It's now, and Iran is being painted, as we discussed. That's a reality now. That's happening. Iran and Pakistan, Iran and Israel, obviously, I guess. That's happening. Pakistan has also launched strikes into Iran. The Houthis are still at it, but again, Iran is being painted as the primary target in all of these conflicts. Yeah, that's where we are. Ukraine is still going strong. The Russians are no longer running out of bullets. They get a whole bunch of ammunition from the North Koreans. Good for them, I say. Whatever it takes.
Oh, North Korea has said they've vowed to make Korea one state now.
No, actually, they've gone the opposite. So, sorry, but until yesterday or the day before, the North Korean constitution declared that they need to become one state. That has now gone. And instead, what they've done, they've declared South Korea enemy number one. Enemy number one. They, for all its existence, the reunification was the number one agenda item for North Korea. And now that's gone. They don't register, but they've said that South Korea is the number one enemy they have in the world.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Sorry, I trended it out. Well, if they're enemy number one and they destroy them, they'll get their state.
Well, they're gone, right? But the reunification, which was on the agenda for the last 50 years, that's out the window. That's out the window, yeah. But interestingly, North and South Korea, after hostilities subsided, because there was a war there, if you remember, Korean War, there was never any peace treaty signed. So technically, just technically, in reality, North Korea and South Korea have been at war for the last, 23, almost 70 years?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a thing. That happened. but there's one thing that had to do with the indigenous people. An article I recently picked up. Now, we talked about this before, and you might recall, Dave, the dark earth in the Amazon.
Yeah.
So they found this amazing dark earth, which is super fertile, like super fertile, right? It's like, and in some areas, and it's quite a few areas, in fact, in the Amazon where they have it, in near settlements usually, massive cities, as we now discover. It's full of nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and essentially it's a carbon-enriched earth as well. But the process on how to actually make this earth escapes us. We don't know. We don't know how they make it. It's not the charcoal production. It is similar to that, but it's not the same because it produces different kind of carbon. So we just don't know how they do it, right? Now, the thing is this though. It is really thick, 3.8 or meters or 12.5 feet in areas. And again, it's not natural. People made it and put it there. And like I said, it is super fertile, right? And it just goes to the theory that we've always had, that the entire Amazon basin was one gigantic park at some point. Not just a park, but also clearly a breadbasket.
Yeah, that's right.
But all of it, I think, was worked. All of it was actually cultivated, funnily enough, right? And they found 2,000-year-old urban centers, like we discussed, in Ecuador. I mean, okay, if there's one, then there are more. And if they're 2,000 years old, there might be older ones as well, right? So, again, it is something that is now coming to light. And something that scientists are finally investigating and finally having a look at. And it's astounding. Because normally rainforest soil, as you might know, is really quite thin, and it's not really that fertile. It's fertile for 3 or 4 years. Once you got rid of all the trees and you start farming crops, that's okay. But the earth will be washed away, and eventually you end up with huge patches of nothing, right? That's what normally happens, but not with this dark earth.
That's because the symbiotic relationship between all the plants in the sandy loam that they live in does nothing. You look at it and go, look at the lush forest. If I cut that down, I can put a great farm there, and then you realise there's nothing to the soil.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the interesting thing is the oldest layers that have been found so far, and I have to emphasize found so far, are about 5,000 years old. That's about when agriculture was, in fact, this is before agriculture was meant to have started in Europe or in Asia and the Middle East. Okay, and then there was a lot more dark earth produced about 4,000 years ago, right? But the peak of this production was reached about 2,000 years ago. Now, this is, then about 500 years ago, something went wrong, and people believe, well, what went wrong was that Columbus came along and killed all the indigenous people. Well, not directly, but all the diseases and whatever.
More blankets.
That's it. Now, the thing is this. The latest estimations put the population of the Americas at that time to about 56 million people. 56 million people. Not too far behind Europe. And in fact, so many of them died, scientists have now found, it actually cooled the Earth's climate. Okay, so less people, producing carbon, etc., and less fires, and all these wonderful things. So it also turns out that this dark Earth traps about 7.5 times more carbon compared to normal soil. And again, we don't know how that is. We just don't know, because we don't know how they made it. We don't know. We call it something. We call it biochar. It's like, okay, placebo effect. Okay, don't worry about it.
That makes it go away, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes it go real good. So, but for our future, this is really the critical point here, right? So for our future, it is really of the utmost importance to find out how they made this earth and how they made it so fertile. I mean, what was the process? Because we are running out of arable land, right? And
I'll just imagine where we could farm, Maggie, if that was the case.
Oh, brother, absolutely. This is astounding. So again, sorry, the point is, this was done, and again, thousands of. I mean, the oldest they found so far is 5,000 years old. Now, 5,000 years old. Where does it put us? That puts us in Sumer, Dave.
Yeah, that's right.
And Babylon and whatnot, right? So, an agricultural revolution. Because the thing is this: you don't create this earth unless you perform agriculture. What's the point? Do you know what I mean? I made this great loam, this great earth. So why? Oh, yeah, good questions. Because I'm farming, you morons. So we have to re-examine our understanding of history in general. Okay, and this is not a huge thing like finding ancient machinery buried under the ice or whatever. This is a really simple thing. We found extremely fertile earth, deliberately put there in almost 4 meters deep, Dave. This is not some kind of hobby gardener.
It's not a hobby farm, no.
This was
that's industrial farming, that is.
Yeah, this was done in anger. Some earth. I'll show you about earth. Right, and then we always say, "Oh no, it all came out of the Middle East." So no, clearly not. Clearly not. Now they might have, cultivated different plants. And I've always wondered as well about these plants, especially tropical plants. Right. In Europe, you grow up with pears and apples and berries and such. Not very exotic. But I looked at these exotic fruits. And now living in Australia and having traveled in South Asia quite extensively, I've come across a lot more tropical fruits, which previously I hadn't known. And I look at them, and if you were to design fruits that were to feed a great many people, that would be durable, that would be transportable, you're going to say that you couldn't engineer it better than what we have.
That's right.
The funny thing with bananas, a banana is a really great source of food.
Mm-hmm.
It comes in its own wrapper, and funnily enough, it doesn't have any seeds, or it has very few seeds. You might sometimes find
you can cultivate them.
Yes, yeah. You have to, like, if you want to have more banana trees, you have to essentially take a cutting from an existing banana tree.
That's right.
And plant it. So I mean, trying to find seeds is going to be very difficult. I mean, they do exist. Don't get me wrong, but they're tiny, right? And there are also different kinds of bananas. I understand that, but most of these bananas, they're clones of each other. They don't seem to reproduce like normal plants do, right? And that seems to be no one is talking about that. Okay, that's interesting. Other fruits. Look at the humble coconut. Look at the coconut, and the coconut tree, and the whole shebang. Right? It carries water inside, okay, which is actually nutrient laced as well. It's got flesh you can eat. The shell is quite hard. In fact, you can store it for a long time and still consume it. It also transports rather well, right? And if you know what you're doing, it's fairly easy to open, and almost every part of the plant is useful. Bamboo is the same thing. Bamboo is probably the most useful plant on the planet. You can even eat it, the bamboo shoots, right? So if I were to engineer plants, I don't think I would bother too much with rye and such, to be honest with you, or wheat. I would have maize, corn, I would have bamboo, I have coconut, I have banana, and those are the plants I would focus on and concentrate. And they grow by themselves. They take very little care. I mean, there you go, they're just growing. Eat, grow, boom, done. Doesn't require intensive farming, it just grows. In the tropics, of course. But yeah, look, I'm everywhere we look, I'm convinced that there were many cultures, many civilizations for this one, and this we see the big things, like Baalbek and the pyramids, and we see all the monolithic, cultures and the wonderful stonework that has been done, but we just miss it. Well, but the other evidence, in my opinion, is even more overwhelming. Look at this black globe, and then look at the plants that exist today. Plants, the edible flora, right? Because the banana would not naturally develop that way. Which animal is going to come along and take a cutting of a banana tree? That's not how like some gigantic bee with a machete. No, I don't think so. But yeah, I mean, you know what I mean? It's astounding. But even the domestication of grass, which is wheat and rye and so forth, we haven't been able to replicate. Do you know that? I know you know this, Dave, but none of our listeners know this. We have not been able. The Japanese have been trying for decades to with accelerated growth and even some gene manipulation to make grass into grain. They've been trying, but we haven't been successful. So and I know we discussed this before, but think about the foresight it would have taken when a guy or girl looked at, like a patch of grass and thought, oh, cake. I see cake in my future. Right? Well, sorry, at least bread. Okay? I see bread. Really? Where? That's what the cows eat, man.
And then grass. They say, what's bread?
Yeah, that's exactly. But, I mean, because the domestication, without any genetic manipulation of grass, would have taken many, many, many generations with no payoff in those generations.
That's
no
right.
Payoff, zero payoff, right? I mean, hunting you can get right away. Hunting makes sense, but even domestication makes sense because there's the animal there. I can milk it, I can skin it, I can eat it. That makes sense immediately. Right? If foraging makes sense immediately, or even roots. I can take roots like potatoes, and I can plant them here, and then hopefully they grow. Right? That makes sense. But grains, the domestication of grains makes no sense at all. It takes too long, with no payoff. Right? But Dave, they all said, well, we didn't really figure it out ourselves. We were told about this.
That's right.
People came along and said, hey, guys, bread, cake, huh? What do you say? Come on, bagels, donuts. Hey, okay.
And bagels. And that was after the flood.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They all wrote that they were taught everything that they need to know this time around.
Yep.
So,
yes.
Fleece put a really cool thing in there, a dinosaur.
I like it.
Yeah, it's very funny. Gonna say something, Becky, that might surprise you. Now, I was watching Free to Air this morning while I ate my raisin toast with lots of butter. And it was a commercial on the TV on Free to Air, which just gives my spine a tingle. Watching Free to Air is, really? Do I have to? But guess what? It was a commercial done where they didn't show the people themselves. They showed the Platos cave shadows of people.
Really?
Yeah. I forgot to write it down. It's probably a Queensland ad or, a local northern New South Wales ad for I think it was a beverage of some kind. It had people. You were looking down at what looked like sand, and the people's shadows were impossible because you couldn't have that many people crowd around a camera and have the shadows so small. But nonetheless, it was digitally created. But that was the first time that I'd sat myself in Plato's cave looking at the shadows on the wall.
Huh.
I hadn't done it before then. I considered what it would look like. But you heard the sounds of people playing, and then you could identify, the people in the family by the shadow that they were casting. It was all done by silhouettes and rotoscoping, right? But if you know what that means, if you're an old sci-fi person before CG, that's what they used to do, is used to cut the people out, called rotoscoping, so that you could put two videos over each other and one person was entirely cut out before green screen. So anyway, so I was really surprised. Let me say I was taken aback. I just imagined myself sitting in Plato's cave, watching the shadows, watching these shadows in particular of people having fun. I wasn't having fun. I'm chained into the cave. I can't leave. What is this fun people are having? But it's entertainment. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it have been nice if they'd listened to our show and got it? They got the Plato's cave thing.
Well,
it would be nice. I'm not saying they did, but nonetheless, there it was. I'll try and see if I can dig up a copy or do something, or at least film it or something. I don't know, to show you what it looks like.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love to see it. Oh, brother. But yeah, look, that was probably the key thing I wanted to mention. I mean, there's another interesting story that came up. I think this came up on Facebook. I want to say the Wahara or the Waihara, which were the apparently the indigenous people of New Zealand before the Maoris came.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, it's not the only time we've come across this kind of phenomenon. The original inhabitants of Japan, what was the Ainu? Let's say from right.
That sounds right. They were Northern Japanese.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Now.
Well, they contracted to the Northern Japanese.
Yeah. They were Caucasian though, when they were first encountered. And even now you can see them, even though of course they've interbred now quite a bit. They're it's a very interesting situation. So it seems that they were Caucasian. So the Asian immigrants came later, and similarly, the people of New Zealand, the Waihara, apparently also red-haired and fair-skinned, or sort of blondish, reddish. Funnily enough, you find red hair in Aboriginals, which is really interesting. Now, not like a redhead like you find with a Scotsman, I guess, but red is in there. It's fascinating. And they were mostly assimilated over time. All these populations were either killed or assimilated. That's another interesting situation. I mean, who are the indigenous people really? Right? I mean, who? We know in Australia that we had 5 distinct migrations in Australia, coming from the north and pulling down, of different peoples, displacing the peoples that were there before. So while elements of the culture are continuous for 60, 80,000 years, whatever it might be, they're not all the same people. It might be the same culture, if you will, but the people certainly, were not, they're not homogeneous. Let's put it that way. It's very interesting. So there's different schools of thought on these things. It doesn't really matter ultimately, but I just want to know. I mean, how far do you have to go back to find the real indigenous people? Okay, I just want to know.
That's a very good question.
And apparently the Ainu and the Basque language have some correlation. That's
Oh,
interesting. Yeah, I know, right?
the
And
ancient,
full-blooded
the
Ainu may
ancient
have had.
Hungarian and Australian Aboriginals had a very similar language.
Yeah. Well, that means it must be a Turkic language if it's Magyar,
Yeah.
because there were three waves of migration to Europe from Asia, and they might have. Well, if there were three to Europe, why not into Australia, which is much closer?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever was happening in Asia, which pushed people out, would have pushed in all directions. I would say, right?
That's what I would say too.
Yeah, and it appears that I've got an article here that full-blooded Ainu may have even had blue eyes or brown hair. But look, we don't know for sure because there aren't very many full-blooded Ainu left. So genetic testing is going to be difficult, I guess. Anyway, now I'm not being imperialistic or white supremacist here. I just want to know what goes on in the world. Right? I have no stake in any of these things. There's no benefit to me either way. But yeah, the Wahara are in a similar, I guess, boat when it comes to New Zealand. And look, if you go back far enough, you will find that there are significant people movements, and they have mixed our gene pool to such an extent that we were hard pressed to find anyone who's pure this or pure that. Not only that, forget about the Homo sapiens component that exists today, Homo sapiens sapiens. Think about all the other progenitors of Homo sapiens that are mostly no longer with us, and we only have the genetic traces in our DNA, right? Denisovan and Ferensis, Neanderthal, etc., etc. There's a whole bunch of them. I mean, they might still exist somewhere. We just don't know where. And if they're half smart, they stay well out of sight.
That's the truth there.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting thought here, right? I mean, who was first? Who was where first? And what did the human race look like 20,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, 500,000 years ago? How? One thing for sure, it was a lot more diverse than what we have today. Guaranteed, a lot more diverse. And I will also say that probably 20,000 years ago, 25,000 years ago, even 30,000 years ago, because of the ice age that was raging, as it were, and the relatively low sea levels, right, making land journeys a lot easier around the equatorial regions, I believe that trade was flourishing. I reckon any culture that would have existed during the ice age, when most of northern Europe and North America were covered, in fact, in ice, and the only places where you could really live well was near the equatorial zones, like southern Europe down into the equatorial Guinea, etc., into what's now Southeast Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, and Ecuador in the Americas. Those cultures would have been thriving because there wouldn't have been massive voyages required across the oceans, because the oceans, they were like 100 meters lower.
Mm-hmm.
And like any ocean journey would have been significantly shorter in those days, with many more islands that you could have rested on in your journey. So I think trade would have been flourishing. I think there was massive contact between peoples back then, and I think a global civilization arose, maybe many. And I believe that the human race was a lot more diverse than it is today, a lot more diverse in every aspect. Height, skin color, hair color, eye color, and maybe other features that we just don't know about anymore, right? It's in the stories that we still have from those times, right? We think they're fairy tales and mythology. Well, what if they're not? What if they describe races that existed, human races, right? Because the thing is this: you have to be human to interbreed with human. If your DNA is too far removed from one another, you cannot reproduce.
That's
like
right.
A donkey and a horse, donkey and a horse, you can't do it. It can't be done. The offspring that you have is going to be sterile. It's a mule. So, right? And you look, think about these people with blue skin and green skin and truly red skin, right? And other features, maybe pointed ears. Why not? No, but exactly. Yeah, I know you. I mean, why not? Yeah. And hairy, very hairy. Maybe somewhere very hairy. Maybe somewhere not hairy at all. I mean, even today, we have people that are very hairy, body hair, and people that have virtually no hair at all.
That's right.
So, I mean, it's follicles, everybody. If you look at Sasquatch and Yeti, oh, this hairy, must be animals. No fur or body hair. It infers nothing. It infers nothing at all. I mean, go to any European beach.
Yeah, there you go.
Go to the Mediterranean and see if you can find a Sasquatch there. I tell you what. No, I'm serious. Like, I mean, some people are extremely hairy and a lot of testosterone. And
she's a Bigfoot, isn't she, Gus?
Oh, I can get some hate for that. But look, I just want people to think about this, Dave. I just want people to think about it. Not dismiss it out of hand, right? I mean, maybe there were some really big humans back then. Right? I know we discussed this before as well. Because the thing is this: when you look at some of the elephant species that existed in the past, no longer exist. I mean, there were elephants that were bigger than the mammoth. Okay? I mean, big elephants, like 4 meters, 5 meters tall, I think, right? That's tall. That's a tall elephant. And other species. We also have dwarf elephants. Okay?
That's pygmy elephants, yep.
Yeah, sorry, exactly. Pygmy elephants, right? Sharks, crocodiles, they vary greatly in their size. Why can't we? Why do we not vary in size that much?
Anthropomorphizing. That's why.
People say, "Oh, your skeleton couldn't hold you up." Well, dinosaurs were there. They were big. You just have bigger bones and maybe slightly different bones, like the Star Child skull bones, right? Which is really enamel with some strengthened fibers in there. That was meant to be human. Okay, that was meant to be human, and something else maybe, but human. Okay, so what's going on here, right? We don't know. That's the thing. We don't know. I mean, and it's not like we don't have examples of things that are massive. Look at the redwoods. I mean, those are trees that should be growing in forests that are inhabited by giants. That's what it should be. By the same token, we've got tiny little trees too. Right? The Japanese love creating these bonsai trees.
I always marvel, Mackie, at both the size of the Greek buildings and the Egyptian buildings, and how unrealistically tall the doorways were.
I know, right?
Who were they built for?
You're right, but see, and that's when we look at the art, the in the temples, but going further back to the Sumerians and Babylonians, where the gods, in inverted commas,
were 3 times bigger than humans.
Exactly, and humans look like children in comparison.
That's right.
Now you could say, "Oh, it's a perspective thing." No, we know that's not the case because these giants, let's call them, were also holding lions in their
lions
arms.
weren't small lions.
No, exactly, like with a mane, like you expect, not a cat. This was a lion, and it was the size of a cat compared to the person holding it, of course. and elephants too, they were depicted next to them, and again humans came up to about the knee,
Yeah.
maybe above the knee slightly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, if these gods were seated, then the head would just be at seat level of normally sized humans.
Yeah, I've seen those. And look, the rumors are that there is hidden from our society the unwanted tall skeletons in the Smithsonian and other places. And they're rumors because, show me a current photograph of them. I remember seeing an example of those up on a board one time, and it was pictured from a non-English speaking country. They had an example, then they all disappeared, and the person posting these photographs their claim was, well, we visited that museum and they had it there, and then we went back a few years later and it was all gone and no one knew of it except we had photos, and here's the photographs. So it's they I wonder what that narrative holds as secrets. The very tall skeletons, that is. So look, if the Sumerian gods are that tall and we found evidence of those tall people but none of us were tall, the human race, for instance, wasn't tall, then is that proof that those aliens or gods were here?
Yeah.
It makes sense for all those huge, monuments and doorway. I just can't get over the doorway being, 60 feet tall. It makes no sense.
Makes no sense. I mean, again, not only that, but you look at these monoliths or these massive stones that they used to work with, right? Also makes no sense unless it's nothing special, right?
Yeah, they're unreasonably big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes no good sense at all. But there are stories. You see, that's the problem, and we do have depictions of these giants. We have stories of these giants, not just in Europe, everywhere. In the Americas, there's stories of this giant race as well, which did battle with the North American indigenous people as well. They were indigenous, but then we had other indigenous people, and apparently they were cannibals. Now this goes back, of course, to the story of before the flood. And before the Tower of Babel, and the Tower of Babel, and sort of the Tower of Babel and the flood stories are kind of intertwined. Okay, they're not the same story, but I fear I feel rather that these stories have a common source. And you have to. I mean, the flood happened, right? And the flood happened as punishment for something. Okay, and the Tower of Babel also. Elicited punishment from the gods, and that's what led to the language confusion, etc., etc. Right. So clearly, there's an event being remembered here, where we all pulled together as one and created something astounding, I want to say, and either it displeased someone who was more powerful than us, or something happened, a natural coincidence, an accident, and destroyed it, and then people thought that this was the punishment of the gods, where in fact it was just a natural catastrophe. I mean, who knows? But the point is, something happened, and there was this feeling of punishment. But it also talks about cannibalism. One of the reasons the flood came about is because people had gotten into the habit of eating their children. And that kind of story is echoed also in some of the ancient mythologies that we have, especially in the Greek mythology, where one specific guy offers up Zeus, I think, his children for supper, and is then promptly punished quite severely for his transgression. But you know what? Who knows? If you look at the state of the world today, okay, so cannibalism isn't really something we practice too much, but we let people starve to death. That's just as appalling, I think, right? And who knows what crazy fashion people follow, or why certain things happen. I mean, who knows? Who knows? It's a crazy world, man. You know, we have child murder in India. Recently, this other report that came through the other day, Dave, where there's someone raped every hour, every minute, or whatever, and children are being murdered.
Awful.
Oh yeah, but that's because in the slums they have no power. The police is not interested in investigating anything.
Mm-hmm.
So predators have an easy time. If you're a pedophile, if you're or rapist or any kind of predator, that's where you go. You go where you have the least chance of being discovered, like Catholic Church. I'm not being facetious either. Right? You go to Catholic Church, become a priest, and you can do whatever you want. Chances are you will never have to face a reckoning. Okay, it's the same. Where you have people that are exposed and have no power, they can't fight back, and even if they were trying to fight back, they'd be left out in the cold, right? So maybe something similar happened back then, where we just took it maybe a step further. I mean, who knows? We are capable of some horrific things. But yeah, those giants, or some of those giants, were meant to be cannibals. In fact, in German there are many fairy tales which speak about Menschenfresser, which is cannibal, but what it really says is a man-eater or human-eater, right? Menschenfresser. And Tom Thumb, or the English Tom Thumb, but the German Däumling, saves his 12 brothers from this Menschenfresser by confusing this terrible person, a human, not a monster. He was married to a human woman, and he had 12 daughters, and Tom Thumb, or Däumling in German, managed to confuse him so that he killed his daughters instead of Tom Thumb's brothers. And asked his wife in the morning to go and prepare the boys for him for breakfast. And of course, the mother goes and sees that her daughters are murdered. And, "You monster, what have you done?" And he, quite irate, tries to go after Tom Thumb and his 12 brothers. Anyway, but the point here is this. These stories exist. They are there, right? And I think they're cultural artifacts that remember something. I think we're remembering something. Okay? We can't just dismiss it. I'm really upset when people just dismiss stuff. Yeah, it's just nonsense, man. It's just crazy. And I gotten to the point where I don't want to talk to people anymore. Because I no longer have the energy.
I hear you. I really do.
I just don't. This is enough.
So to add to your point, we're a culture with amnesia. We don't remember past the flood. There isn't anything. And it's only those stories that have allowed us to remember portions of it. It's kind of like going on a blinder and drinking way too much and not knowing how you got home, and then you just get these little flashes, these stories from friends about what happened before you woke up. And that's kind of what we're finding, all these things, all the tepes, it means hill. So all these tepes we're finding that supported thousands of people. But it's at a time when we should have only been hunter-gatherers. Makes no sense. They've found a wooden Stonehenge, if that makes any sense. But now that the ocean level has come up, it's more than rotted away. But it's petrified to some extent, which is really interesting. And no one can explain it. No one wants to explain it. It's in a too hard basket. And there is evidence from around the world, even in Australia, that we found some skull fragments from a species before let's be honest. Before the Aboriginal people were occupying the land, or they co-inhabited it at one point, but there was a unique burial, and these have now been recently uncovered, and it isn't the current genome of the Aboriginal, so they're just perplexed. Here we go. We got some more, I tells you. More proof that we had bipedal humans all over the planet, which supports the flood theory. It supports it. It supports there being life everywhere, and we were, harmonious or whatever, what have you. We spoke the same language, even it may be telepathy, as we've postulated. That could have been the single language. That would make sense.
Yep.
So, one thing about language making, I love this, that babies can make the rudimentary mouth shapes for every language.
Mm-hmm.
Until they fall into one of them.
Yes.
Isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah. Look, that's why you should teach your children languages when they're young.
Yeah. There you go.
100%.
So, it is pretty crazy. There's some crazy things going on in the world, and I don't think the lies have stopped. And when I say that, I mean, do you remember that the general who said, first it was Iraq, and then blah blah blah, listed all these countries, including Syria, then Iran, and Iran was the last in that list. And at the top of the show, and the prior show, we talked about Iran being targeted. Now it's painted with a laser. That's what it's called, painted or targeted. And it's the bad people now. Iran is coined the bad people. In more than our media, this is going maybe across the globe. But I was super surprised. Who did you say that bombed, that did something in Iran at the top of the show? What country did you mention?
So Pakistan is
Pakistan. That's a surprise.
I know, right?
I would have thought Pakistan would be bombing India, but what are they? What are the fantasy football teams or leagues? If I had a fantasy war game, who'd take sides, I didn't think Pakistan would be, against Iran. Maybe I don't know some of the politics there, but wow, that really took me. Very surprised by that one.
It's.
They go back then, right? They go way back with their arguments.
Oh, they do. Funnily enough, they do get along most times, but it's an interesting conundrum because it's the, I guess, what they both define as terror groups within each other's country that they're targeting, with cross-border incursions. So they're not targeting Iranian or Pakistani installations. They're targeting groups they are calling
right.
I don't know, terrorists, I guess, from the other side. And
that's a great multi-use name. That now,
right? I know, right? So they're also reclassifying, or the British are reclassifying the Houthis as a terrorist organization. They had unclassified it, years ago to allow aid to go into Yemen, but now they're reclassifying it.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know. I just fear there will be more. There will be more in the region. More is going to happen. Okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah, more's going to happen. All right.
Yeah. It's going to be it's a volatile region at best, and now everybody's just throwing gasoline on it. See what happens.
Maybe I should look for a job at BAE, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, or something like that. Because they'll all be in the money in a minute.
No one has lost money betting on the military-industrial complex. If I can tell you that.
That's true.
That's just not going to happen anytime soon.
I need to pick the one that's got the UFOs. That's what I need to pick. I need to pick that one.
Yeah, well, whoever. So who's got Skunk Works? Lockheed Martin.
Yeah, Lockheed Martin.
Lockheed Martin. We'll go with those guys.
Hey, do you know what I saw? To wind the show up, I saw this thing. You know, the F-14. I remember talking about the CPU that was in the F-16. Because when I started working at a computer company, their CPU was in the F-16. It was a secretly developed, top secret CPU, right? And it was multi-core, and it did all this stuff. And today's phones are pretty much as fast as that back then in the 80s. I was recently watching, I think it's called an MP900, one of the first CPUs that was in the F-14. And at the time, there was no commercially available CPU. It was only mainframes. And this was classified up until 1982, when the next generation fighter was the F-16 was deployed. And for the 25 years that this chip had existed, way before the public ever had access to it, it was in the nose cone of the F-14.
Okay.
Just crazy. It was a real document that was unsealed and discovered recently, and it goes to prove it. It's proving this technology. So 25 years before, wow, think about that, like 1982. That's when I was in California in high school. So 25 years prior to that, was before I was born, and they already had an IC as we know them today. This was a fully formed processor. So yeah, I wanted to let everyone know that what I was saying was real.
Oh yeah.
I can't tell you anything more about the F-16 because I don't know the name of it, but that'll be that'll be released to the public at some point, I'm sure. All I can say is how many flops it was. Just crazy, Mackie. It's like Terminator when they find that CPU and it's like, Cyberdyne Systems. We're going to make one of these, right? Exactly the same as that. It's like, wow, I didn't think this even existed at that time, right? Yeah.
But again, right? there's a whole theme there, my friend, isn't it?
There is. 1 minute.
Oh, which reminds me. Sorry, before we go into the next show, I do. This is the next show cycle after the Epiphany and the hypothesis and all that. I want to look at something called Kozyrev mirrors. I did a lot of reading on this now and a lot of research into it. I watched a few documentaries on it as well. This is fascinating stuff, Dave.
Yeah, I had a quick look at the details, and I'm fascinated too. I found two CIA documents that were declassified on it. I was in there today. Anyway, take care.
Yes. Hey, thanks for letting us spend some time with you all. This has been Platos Cave. Thank you so much for listening. And donate if you can, please. Very important. But most important, be safe.